Thank you for joining us for this kind of quickly put together call, but we want to make sure we're bringing you the most relevant information. And I would say this is kind of part one of what may be a series. These series will involve both us doing webinars as well as emails. And what you see on your screen right now, that's me sharing my screen, you will also see that banner at the top of emails that we're going to be using to try and keep everybody updated as the American Rescue Plan rolls out. I am Robert Palmer, and joining me today is Aaron Mullinex, who will be talking about the DUNS numbers in a little bit, and Daniel Stoller from the Iowa League of Cities, who is behind the scenes making Aaron and I look good. So the purpose of the call today is to begin getting you all, the cities in the state of Iowa, ready for the receipt of funding under the American Rescue Plan. The state and local government portion is the most significant amount of federal funds to be distributed to cities and states in a generation, if not ever. With this funding will certainly come the responsibility to utilize these funds in the manner and purpose that has been laid out by Congress. The overarching purpose of these funds is to help cities and their communities to recover and to stabilize from the fiscal impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll be talking a little bit more about this, but we do continue to wait for guidance from the U.S. Treasury Department that will provide greater detail on how these funds can be used, the reporting requirements, and any other parameters they may put around them. I would mention that these parameters may change throughout the process, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that is why we call this to be an ongoing process. In the meantime, as a city and cities officials, you should begin developing a plan on how these funds might be used. You should seek input from groups and businesses in your community that may have been adversely impacted, and certainly begin meeting amongst yourselves to see what the priorities of your companions are. Keep in mind that this plan, the American Rescue Plan, which is being lovingly referred to as the ARP plan, includes several financing sources beyond the state and local funding. We're going to talk mostly about the local funding today for cities. So there are other programs that your city may be able to take advantage of. The National League of Cities, which is a partner of the Iowa League of Cities, has many of these provisions on their website in a searchable way. I would also note for you that on the bottom of the screen, you can view there, you'll see a button with a kind of a treasury bill in the background that says American Rescue Plan Resources. If you go to the Iowa League of Cities website, you will see that button. And if you click on that button on our website, it will take you to all the resources that we have. And I will tell you that that is being constantly updated with all of the guidance that we will receive from the federal government, from the state government, and any other resources that we can provide to you all to help through this process. So as we get started and we jump into the rest of the slides, I want to start off with the big message, which is if you take nothing else from this call, it should be that every city will need, regardless of size, will need a DUNS number. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Aaron's going to kind of explain what that is, how you can locate yours or set one up if you can't locate it. But the big message is that we have right now, you will need a DUNS number. So go ahead and begin locating that or setting one up if you don't believe you have one, but most cities will already have one. All right, what we are talking about is the American Rescue Plan, and specifically the Local Fiscal Recovery Fund that was included within that plan. The ARP, American Rescue Plan, is legislation that was passed by Congress and signed by President Biden on March 11th. It is a large bill that has a great deal of financial support for the nation within it. $195 billion for states, $130 billion for local governments, such as cities, includes counties as well, $20 billion for tribal governments, and $4.5 billion for territories. The law that Congress passed calls for the rules to be developed and released within 60 days. That puts it at May 10th as the final date when we should see rules begin coming out. We've already seen a first version, what they're referring to as the pre-award requirements. And that can be found on the Treasury's website, which on the League page I mentioned earlier, we do provide links to. That guidance came out on 4/15/21. I would say that we are expecting new guidance at any time. Every now and then you'll see me look over. I keep hitting refresh because I have been knocking on wood thinking that they're going to release the new guidance during this call. So if we are that fortunate, I assure you we will schedule another call right away. And we do have a few other calls that are tentatively scheduled to be had as soon as we get the guidance out with partners like the National League of Cities and also partners at the state of Iowa, such as Governor Reynolds. So keep an eye out for those in your email. So as I mentioned, the Treasury rules are due by May 10th, and we expect to see those anytime, but certainly before that date. I want to quickly note, I met with Treasury 2 weeks ago, and just like the CARES Act, which many of you would remember going through, the rules will be released, but are not final. Now, they may be called final rules, but they have assured us that they are going to be very responsive to communities. And so throughout this process, as we come up with concerns or problems or areas of flexibility that are needed, Treasury has encouraged us and given us the information to contact them to get that information in front of them, because more than getting rules that are finalized by May 10th, they want this to be a successful program which serves the purposes that Congress has laid out. So we will have rules. They will be somewhat in a final form by May 10th, but they can adjust. Just to reference back as an example, many of you may remember with the CARES administration, that started where there was no clear public safety reimbursement. Then we got 20% public safety reimbursement improved, and then that number increased gradually throughout the process. So there is precedent for there to be flexibility within these rules as they are released. What we know is that the legislation includes direct funding for cities. So to talk about Iowa specifically, the legislation includes direct funding for all communities in the state of Iowa, regardless of population size. Now, certainly the amount each city receives varies based on population, but every city will have a disbursement available to them. The uses that have been released so far by the Treasury and by the legislation that was passed by Congress is for COVID-19 response and mitigation. So that is costs associated with responding to COVID-19 and mitigating those impacts within your communities. Revenue loss, so that is new. The CARES Act did not include a provision to make up for revenue loss. The American Rescue Plan does. So revenues lost by your community over the past year can be claimed through this program. Infrastructure, this is one that I am very, very excited about. Water, sewer, and broadband. That infrastructure is explicitly laid out as something that these funds can be used for. So as we look, I know that if we look across the state of Iowa, 942 cities, the impact on all of your communities differs, whether or not you had hotel and motel, whether or not you had casino revenues, other revenues that may have fluctuated throughout the response to COVID-19. So while that may vary, I think in talking with many of you, I think infrastructure is something that is universally needed across the state and that we should all be able to take advantage of and hopefully make investments that can save citizens money in the future. Now, I would also quickly add in premium pay to eligible workers is another approved use. Now, I've laid out kind of the 4 headlines here that have been released. We expect these to be the type of headlines which Treasury provides a significant amount more guidance underneath. So a question may arise of what type of revenue loss. Right now in our conversations, we understand it to be very open, but Treasury will provide more guidance on that. When it comes to infrastructure, what type of infrastructure? What does a water project explicitly mean? What is sewer? Does that include maybe if we do more green infrastructure versus gray infrastructure? And certainly broadband. What does that include? Does that include grants? Does it include just direct infrastructure? Can it include buying the fiber, buying the conduit? So these are the headlines that at this time, we do not have clarifying guidance on that. That's what we're waiting for from Treasury. There are 2 different types of distributions that will take place. We have entitlement cities, which will receive a direct payment from the Treasury. To put it in very simple terms, the federal government has their bank account number and therefore can send them the money directly. And that is the plan for administration of those dollars. There are only 10 cities that, from my understanding, are meeting that requirement today based on what the federal government has in their information. I've listed those cities up there. For these entitlement cities, you will need, for entitlement cities, for these 10 cities in Iowa, you will need a DUNS number and a SAM registration. So this is a little bit different than what we're about to talk about. Entitlement cities, from the guidance we have right now from Treasury, will need a DUNS number and a SAMS number. So what Treasury is advising you to do is to begin gathering your payment information and ensure that you have those numbers and know where they are and how to locate them. I've put an example of what information Treasury may be looking for if they reach out to you. They'd be looking for your EIN, that's your employee identification number, your name, your contact information, name and title of the authorized representative in your community that they would need to be speaking to if there are questions, and then your financial institution information on what exactly we would do. And I did see a message pop up. It looks like I missed one, and I thought I stole this list right off the federal. So maybe in my copying and pasting, oops, I did miss one. So I apologize on that. But if you are an entitlement city, I believe you know who you are, and I can even send an email to those cities specifically. But it is an entitlement cities will receive their money in this way. Moving to all other cities in the state of Iowa, which are non-entitlement cities. And to use that example again, to put it simply, the federal government does not have your bank account information and therefore cannot make a direct payment to you. They will receive their distribution from the state of Iowa, very similar to we would receive tax dollars or backfill dollars or other. And so that is going to be a slightly different process, but from our understanding, and when working with the state of Iowa, we've had several meetings with them already about the administration of those dollars and how that may be. It looks as though the state will have fairly minimal engagement in those dollars beyond distributing it. So they cannot restrict the usage any more so than what federal law has. Of course, we are still waiting from the guidance from Treasury, but it does appear at this time that the state's role would be most closely aligned with that of a pass-through. Now, for all other cities besides entitlements, so for the vast majority of Iowa cities, non-entitlement cities, you will need a DUNS number. Now, most cities, and Aaron's going to talk about this a little bit more in a minute, should already have a DUNS number. And so it may be as simple as locating that. But that is the big takeaway, that what we know right now is that you will need a DUNS number for the tracking purposes of these dollars. I wanted to touch on this. I appreciate all of you that have sent us questions ahead of time. I can assure you our hope was to be able to answer all of them concretely today or to direct you to the resources. This is an example of some of the types of questions that have come up. And unfortunately, for the top three, we don't have direct answers. This is exactly what we're looking for from Treasury. So a final guidance timeframe, that is likely to be, as I said, we will have rules put out by Treasury by May 10th. But as far as final guidance, I would keep your ears open because that guidance is likely to adjust and adapt to the needs that are seen as this program is administered. So we will have guidance by May 10th, but that guidance could change, and we're going to do everything we can to keep you updated on that. That's what I mentioned about those emails where we'll have the top line, and we will have additional conference calls on this. Records and accounting measures, we know you will need a DUNS number. Our advice at this time, and if you're an entitlement city, a SAM number as well. Our advice at this time is to be prepared to track everything the way that you would otherwise. This is going to be something where you're going to want to document things so that a future council, even beyond those decision makers of today, will be able to know why dollars were spent in the way that they were, so that there could be some type of justification later because from our conversations, the ability of Treasury to go back at a later date and to audit, for lack of a better phrase, the usage of these funds could be for many years into the future. There is no finite end date to that we know of at this time. So at this time, we are just recommending that as much tracking as you possibly can do is very helpful, and certainly documentation for the future generations to know what occurred. And then what counts as infrastructure? This is a great question. We know water, sewer, and broadband are specifically called out. I can tell you we are asking for a very broad definition of infrastructure, and certainly within those areas which have already been highlighted. This is a bit of an ongoing conversation because as we encourage more flexibility with infrastructure through the American Rescue Plan, you are likely aware that an infrastructure bill is being discussed and debated at the level of Congress. And so those are going to be overlapping discussions as we begin to move forward. And then one question was, if I'm a non-entitlement city, should I register for a SAMS number anyway? And this may be something that Aaron might touch on a little bit more, but just briefly, it's not required for this program, but I do know that there are other reasons that you may need a SAMS number or that it may be valuable to you in the future. So for this program specifically, it is not needed. At least the guidance the Treasury has released at this time is that it is not needed. However, I would tell you that the league has one because of the federal grants that we participated in water quality and other areas. Aaron's been involved in several. And so a SAMS number does have other usage that may come up in the future. I am going to go ahead and pause right there and turn it over to Aaron to talk about DUNS and SAMS numbers. One thing I would quickly mention is that because we have several hundred people on this call, we had well over 500 people register. We do have cameras muted and we do have the chat function going, but you also can't speak. So we're going to do our best, if you enter any questions in that chat, to be able to review those later. Certainly send us emails. We will continue to monitor that. And I can't guarantee we'll be able to answer everything right away, but we're going to do our best to make sure every question is answered through that website I told you about on the league's website under the American Rescue Plan button. We're going to put up as much guidance as we can. So if we can't get to your question today, it is not lost. We are working to get all that answered. And if you have concerns, feel free to share those with us as well. And we will communicate those to the groups we're working with and to Treasury. But Aaron, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you right now and let me know if you need any help.
Great, thank you. And Robert, if you just go to the next slide, I will kind of explain just the basics of what a DUNS and SAMS numbers, what they are. So the DUNS number is a unique 9-digit number that's assigned and kept maintained by Duns and Bradstreet. So that's why it's called the DUNS number. It just verifies the existence of a business entity or organization globally. So it includes governmental organizations such as cities, but also other organizations and businesses. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And then SAMS, all organizations and entities that want to do business with the federal government have to register for a SAMS number. So businesses that grant or loan recipients have to have a SAMS registration. As Robert mentioned, the league has one because we've been involved in federal and certain state level grants that flow from federal agencies. And then those registrations have to be updated every 12 months in order to remain active. And so I just wanted to mention that briefly up front so that if you do, you know that you have a SAMS number, you've been maybe involved in contracts or grants in the past with the federal government, that you do have to go in there once a year and keep that active. So you might just double check to make sure you have it. I will tell you that the DUNS number, well, both are very simple to get, but the DUNS number you can get pretty quickly. Typically, the SAMS numbers, the registration for a SAMS number can take up to 30 days is the guidance. Its average is 7 to 10 days, but you might just want to double check that you have that ready to go in case you're looking for registering for grants, but then also in this case with the American Relief Funds, that you're just set to go to receive those funds. And then I do see in the chat box that someone said, yes, FYI, it will never cost you anything to register in SAMS or DUNS for that matter. Both are free. So if you're seeing something that says otherwise, be a little bit wary of that. They should be free registrations. So entitlement cities, and I apologize, we had maybe just a little, we omitted West Des Moines, I think, from that list, but it is an entitlement city. So entitlement cities will need both a DUNS and SAMS number. And then make sure that it's active. Non-entitlement cities will need a DUNS number, but a SAMS number won't be required for the purposes of the American Rescue Plan. But some cities may consider registering for one anyway. It's free, as we mentioned, and then you can use it in the future for potentially grants or other funding. Okay, so let's talk about finding your DUNS number. I'll mention up front, and I think Robert already mentioned that most cities already have an existing DUNS number. You may not be aware that you have one or what the number is. So you can just go to the website, the Duns and Bradstreet website, and search. And so I've pasted just a sample where I filled in city of Elma. It's as simple as that. You can type the city name in, and then the verification code, enter that in, and then you would hit submit to see if you could find your city. If for some reason your city does not have an existing DUNS number, then you could register for one. It's a very simple process, but more than likely you have one. So after I hit submit with the city of Elma sample, we see several items pop up. You see the city of Elma there at the top. So you would be able from this screen to request what your existing DUNS number is by clicking on that link. It will require you to enter some credentials, who you are with the city, your title, and so forth, your email, phone number, and just basic information. And then they will email you your DUNS number. You can also double check, and I highly recommend that you do, the view and modify your information link, so that you can take a look to make sure that the proper authorized representative is stated there. Maybe you've had some changes that you need to update. Maybe your city hall's moved and you need to update the address. So I would take a look at that. Of course, if you do need to make those changes, you have to certify that the information that you're entering is correct and valid, and that you acknowledge you understand that submitting false information is a crime and so forth. But you are able to go ahead and view and modify your information from that step. Okay, so that's the DUNS number is as simple as that. In most cases, and I typed in many city examples, and I had yet to find a city that didn't already have a DUNS number in there. Not saying that it wouldn't be possible, but that process is very simple for you to request one if you needed it. It's said that it's typically a 1-day turnaround for the DUNS number. So now switching over to SAMS, also a fairly simple process. You would go to the website, it's www.sams.sam.gov, and there's also a tutorial that's very helpful and detailed about how to register for a SAMS number that I've listed there. You will need your DUNS number first, so make sure you go through that process first, and then have available your general city information, addresses, emails, and so forth. Your banking and financial institution information, contact information for who your authorized representatives are, and then cage code is, if you were assigned one through the DUNS process, you'll need to know what the cage code number is. In most cases, you won't have that. And when you register for SAMS, they will give you something called a cage code that you may need if you're going to apply for grants or federal funding. And again, this will take up to 30 days to process the SAMS number. It averages 7 to 10. I think when we applied for ours through the league, we did get it relatively quickly, just in a handful of days. So that is the simple breakdown of how you would go about registering for a DUNS and a SAMS number. You can check to see if you already have a DUNS number. I showed the link for that on the slide. For the SAMS number, you would check with your authorized representative for your city. They would know because they are getting a yearly reminder that they need to update it. Otherwise, you could call SAMS or call and find out if your city already has one.
All right,
So
perfect, Erin.
Yep.
Thank you for that. And as you are all going through that process, Erin has been an incredible resource. We're going to try and make sure the information is up on our website on anything that you may need here. So take a look there. But if there's something we don't have or something that there's some confusion, don't hesitate to reach out to us. I'm going to quickly, and again, keeping in mind that many of these questions won't be able to be answered, I've got the chat here. I'm going to go through and just kind of see if I can touch on a couple of them. One is, would it cover technology for Zoom meetings? So if we remember under the CARES Act, Zoom meetings, the technology needed to respond to the COVID-19 crisis, that was an allowable expense that could be claimed under CARES. So I would guess, at this time we don't have direct guidance from Treasury, but that would be another expense which would be claimable in response to COVID-19 under this program as well. And when we talk about what the sewer cover, we're still waiting to hear on that. That's the type of specific guidance. Street repair projects, again, we'd like to see more guidance that allows for that type of flexibility. I can tell you in some of our conversations, they are looking at the overlap that may include with the other infrastructure bill as well. And so if there is an area that's identified that the American Rescue Plan did not cover, we would certainly love to hear about that as it relates to street repair projects, so we can get that information up when we get to the infrastructure bill. I see there's a comment about separate checking accounts. That may be valuable, although at this time, based on the administration from the state, I am not sure exactly. I've been on the phone with them regularly, and it's not clear whether they will collect your information from a bank account in order to make that deposit, or if they would make the deposit through the financial entities that they currently have for you, because they know that their disbursements today for sales taxes and backfill and the other funds your city receives, they know those are going to the right place. And I can see there being some concern with setting up a newly established bank account and then the state sending money to that. It would likely add additional layers of verification just to ensure that there was no identity fraud or other occurring. And so with that, I'm not saying that's bad guidance at all, but I will have that be something I try and clarify with the governor's office as we work for them, because my impression at this time is that they want to use the current distribution methods. Roads, again, it looks like there may have been some emails that have reached out saying that there is a cost for the SAMS program. We've actually received those as well. There are companies that will email saying that they would help you set them up or to keep them administered, and that has a cost with it. But you setting up SAMS on your own through the government does not. Engineering fees, part of infrastructure projects. In many cases, that has been an anticipated cost that would be included, although I do want to see the final guidance from Treasury to see exactly what they say on that.
I think a lot of the questions as far as what it will cover will be better explained with the guidance when it is released. I see one question that asks, do we know yet whether the funds will be distributed this fiscal year?
It is our understanding that the funds would be distributed within the next couple of months. Now, my hesitation is, and potentially sooner, my hesitation on saying that is until we get the final guidance from Treasury. I don't want to make any commitments to you, but my understanding is that you would receive those funds in the near future, shortly after the Treasury guidance is released. And again, I hesitate to say this because it is uncertain at this time. But in several conversations, what we have been told is that the funds will be distributed. They will not be claimed the way that the CARES Act funding was. With CARES Act, you may remember, you had to submit your expenses. We did a process. RSM was contracted through the governor's office to go through those expenses, ensure that they met the criteria, and then to pay those funds. The conversations we've had at this time have led us to believe that these funds will be distributed, and the usage of those funds would certainly be monitored. It is then possible that funds may have to be reimbursed if they are not used, although I know that there is a desire to make things as flexible and easy for communities as possible. Very similar to CARES, but more flexibility this time. The message is, let's get these funds out and get them helping people and communities, and let's certainly do it right and certainly do it within parameters, but there's a real desire to get these out there so that they can begin causing some good, rather than to have a long application process. And so some of those other questions will need to be answered once we get, and yes, as I'm saying, there will be two payments. It's that first payment that we're expecting to be in the near future. As far as commingling funds, I think that there is a desire to be able to use multiple funding sources to get these projects done. And so I don't believe there will be a time where they will say, an infrastructure project can only use American Rescue Plan dollars to do that. I've been in conversations with various departments here at the state, DNR, for example, where we've been talking with them about, they're going to receive their money as well through the state and from the federal government. So as they're able to expand some of their programs, and governments in the state, local, state, and county governments have additional resources, we're very excited about how those funds might be able to come together to really make a difference in infrastructure needs. So at this time, I have not heard of any prevention of commingling of funds, so to speak. I really think a lot of the conversations have been around how do we stack these benefits. And Aaron, I will go ahead and stop there. And I would encourage anybody that if you have additional questions, comments, concerns, please do check the league's website on that. Send us an email if we have not addressed it, and we will do our best to address it, and certainly get the guidance that addresses it up on the website, with the caveat, and I will refresh one more time just to have the most current information, with the caveat that the Treasury guidance is still not updated as of yet. As soon as, in closing comments, I would tell you, as soon as it's updated, we are going to send out an email again with that updates on the American Rescue Plan headline. So if you're trying to separate out emails from the league, that is how we will have a headline of that for the guidance as soon as it's released, and we can get some information out to you summarized. We are going to do it quickly. So I would thank everyone for joining us today, and do send those emails and questions and comments. And thank you for being here.